So, there has been a good amount of discussion at this event, the sessions we've already heard yesterday and today, about the role of the agency. And often they're put in a position where they have to justify their relevance, right? But what you're saying is that in order for a brand to work at its optimal level, the agency is sort of essential. What makes you say that?
Well, we believe in collaboration, and you can have a really great brand that's really great at doing what it does that needs help doing it better. And I think of the analogy of your favorite athlete, whoever that may be. Don't want to make any unfriends here by picking out someone, but let's say you have your favorite athlete. Guaranteed that athlete didn't get to where they were by themselves. They had a coach, they had several coaches along the way that helped them in elements where they could be better and do better. And so I think that sort of metaphor is the way we think about the brand-agency relationship. And the agency, especially now in the world of programmatic and finding audiences and complex media structures, really has that expertise that a lot of brands don't, because they don't work with activating audiences all over the place in a cross-channel way the same way agencies do. So we see that as a very clean fit between agency and a brand.
Right. And the key here is that agencies aren't coming in and doing things that are completely foreign to the brands, right? They're helping them accomplish some of their goals, their pre-existing goals. So what are some of those brand goals that you think agencies are particularly adept at helping to solve?
Well, like the presentation right before us, it's all talking about relationships and having engaging experiences that customers can relate to. At the end of the day, that's really what it's all about. So agencies, for the most part, have a long history of being really good storytellers. Mm-hmm. And as in yesterday, one of the presenters was talking about, okay, if you have an idea, but you don't have any execution, 100 times 0 is still 0. Mm-hmm. So you have to have that execution element. So I think to the extent that brands say, hey, I want to create a cross-channel experience and I want to be able to provide relevant content and let my customers engage with us wherever they are, however they wish, be it through content, be it through ads, be it through commerce, that's a strategic picture that a brand could have, and then the agency can be like, well, here's some ways we can do it. Let's talk about the nuts and bolts of a media activation, paid versus earned, and how to use a DMP and all these sorts of things. So I think that collaboration can work quite mm-hmm. well as well.
So why would you say that brands have been having some challenges in actually solving these problems on their own? Are there market factors or?
That's a great question. I think in general, a lot of brands tend to think in very siloed ways. There's the mobile people, and then there's the social people, and then there's the e-commerce people, and then there's the web people. And anyone here ever have that sort of thing happen? Okay. And consequently, a lot of data that gets generated by these different groups lives in these different groups and doesn't talk to each other. So that siloing is a little difficult. So to the extent that brands can take a more holistic view of, okay, I want to have an engaging experience with my customers wherever they may be. Mm-hmm. I don't really care if it's just mobile. I want the people to engage. If they're all engaging on the web, that's fine. If they're all engaging on social, that's fine. Most likely it's a combination of all those things.
Right.
So that's where I think brands kind of get a little stuck in worrying about how do we do this execution thing instead of stepping back and being like, how do we empower true cross-channel fluidity, right? How do we let an experience happen regardless of where our customers are?
Yeah. And a lot of if you just look at the challenge board outside, a lot of those challenges have focused on, number one, the brand's relationship with the agency, but then number two, that siloed problem, where you do have these separate teams that don't really work well together. But a lot of what you're talking about in terms of what brands are trying to do that agencies are helping with centers on that idea of finding new customers, maintaining customers, just keeping that communication open and flowing. So what are some ways that agencies, some particularly innovative or interesting ways that agencies are doing this now?
Well, I heard a couple of interesting examples yesterday of agency people or people who are doing programmatic or sounding like agencies. I mean, the lines are really blurring, but I think, to your point, customer acquisition is really top of funnel for every business. So how do you do that in a way that brings in new customers Not just waiting for them to show up on your website or download your app, but finding the new customers wherever they are. So for example, the whole DMP side, you know, we now own BlueKai, and BlueKai has been an incredibly popular service because a lot of people, when they understand that, well, this is my audience and I want to replicate that audience and go find them wherever they live on mobile, social, or on the web, that's a pretty powerful thing. Mm-hmm. So I think agencies really have that expertise about how to merge the data part, the customer acquisition part, and the creative part. I mean, like some of these presentations have said, you know, just data without creativity or without a story is pretty flat. So if you can merge, you know, emotional experiences with customer acquisition and smart data usage, that's a winning play.
Right. Now you've already sort of discussed the problems that brands have internally, but at the same time, there's a trend toward brands taking a lot of these services, even the programmatic buying services, in-house. So I guess, do you see that happening in these areas that you've just discussed, or how does that play out in the next few years?
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting trend going on right now, which is the merging of marketing technologies and ad tech. So anyone who's a marketer that truly understands the Lumascape and all the different components of that, then yeah, and if you have the talent in-house, then go ahead and do all this in-house. Again, going back to the athlete-coach metaphor, you know, a coach has seen, you know, hundreds, thousands of people before that particular athlete. Mm-hmm. And so I think it comes down to the, you know, what you don't know, right? Can you avoid making a mistake? But I think it's a good thing that brands bring stuff in-house. A lot of the tools have gotten a lot simpler to use. We talk about, you know, empowering marketers to be marketers. Right. There are a lot of clients who, you know, go use an email program and then get to a certain point and they need scripting. It's like, oh, what do we do now? We got to go call IT and get someone over to write a script for us, and all of a sudden there's 2-3 weeks that goes up in smoke. So I think it's good to have empowering tools that gets pushed down through the organization. And I think to the point of collaboration, it's really good that the brands are hands-on with these tools, as well as the agency, because then, you know, you're not getting the wool pulled over your eyes either with an agency. You can say, hey, you know what, I tried this and that didn't work. What do you think? So I think it's a good interplay. It keeps both sides honest.
Yeah, and what you said is sort of interesting. And sort of to take or give it a pessimistic spin, is it safe to say that agencies are effective when they work with brands because they've simply seen many people make many mistakes?
I think that's a lot of the value. That's a lot of the value of any professional organization that's done it before, is that they've done it before. Mm-hmm. And so if an agency can keep a brand from doing something that's going to cost them time or money or both, you know, that's a huge win for the brand. Right. And again, I think, you know, we had a conversation with one of our clients who, you know, they're spending 9 figures a year on media, and they're 2 people, and their media strategy is AdWords. You know, that's kind of scary, you know, if you think about it. And, you know, and it may be working for them, but they don't even know that, you know, with that sort of spend, they could be saving a huge amount of money just by leveraging a DMP. You know, that alone, let's say if you knock 10% off of, you know, $100 million of spend, that's a lot of money. Yeah. So I think that's the type of thing, and when I was talking to them, they're like, well, we don't think we can afford an agency. And it's like, look, with that type of money, and if the agency is good and knows what they're doing and does a good job, they're going to pay for themselves many times over. So I think that's a conversation that a brand should have, a frank conversation a brand and agency should have. It's like, you know, we just want to be, you know, we want to get our stuff out there. We want more people to engage, and, you know, we want to be omni-channel. Can share some ideas about how you could help us do that. I mean, that's a good conversation instead of, you know, can you help us deploy our new mobile strategy? You know, it's like, well, you know, okay, yeah, sure, we can do that. But that's, you know, that doesn't really answer the right. bigger question.
Let's try to keep our definitions straight. So you mentioned advertising technology, you mentioned marketing technology. What's the difference there? What fits into each bucket?
Yeah, that's a great question too, because a lot of the lines are really blurred. I mean, you know, in a lot of products, you know, retargeting is an ad technology, but retargeting is built into our responses tool. You know, the DMP is an ad technology tool. You hear a lot of a lot of agencies are using DMPs as part of their media strategy. So I think the simple definition of marketing is any place where your brand touches your customer. When you and your customer touch, that's marketing. So, and I had a conversation with a bunch of global CIOs a few weeks ago, and I joked with them, I'm like, hey, you guys have all been promoted. You're now the CMO as well. And they're like, what do you mean? It's like, well, a lot of the stuff that you're in charge of touches your customers. And where you touch your customer, that's where marketing happens. So that's the definition I'd give of marketing. And that could be messaging, that could be mobile, that could be content marketing, that could be a whole bunch of things. But that doesn't exclude that built into that, there are a lot of ad technology tools. So that's why I say, we have a bunch of questions we go through with customers where we ask them very specific questions. They're kind of ad techy based.
Right.
And that just kind of uncovers the kind of what you don't know, you don't know. It doesn't mean you have to be an ad ops guru to be a marketer, but it helps to have knowledge like, hey, where could we use these ad tech techniques to help our marketing be more effective? So that collaboration point, I think that's really the nexus of where the agency brand conversation can happen, right? How can you help us be more effective? What is it we don't know? What can we do better?
Right.
Can you coach us? That sort of thing.
And can you be a little bit more concrete? What particular ways are these two different technologies, or these two buckets of technology working together?
So without getting too in the weeds, because it's really easy to get there, but think of a trading desk as an example, right? You can use a trading desk just to buy display ads, but your display ads could be loaded with native ads, or it could be all content marketing driven. So you could use a pure ad tech tool set like trading desk or RTB or programmatic to do something that's very marketing focused or content focused. Again, if you're saying what's our programmatic strategy, that's a good question, but probably a better question is what do we do to move our conversation forward about how to get our message in front of the right people at the right time. So for example, a DMP is clearly an ad tech technology, but if you're using a DMP to see that someone for a considered purchase is in market and about to buy, is looking to buy, let's just say, their cell phone contracts coming to the end, and that within a few days they're going to renew, well then you can leverage that information to change your bid structure on, either on Google or Facebook or wherever you're buying, and load those bids with content about, hey, do you know you could save a lot more money by using, our services? Because that you have the golden selling window, and that information is only made possible by the fact that you're using a DMP, but you're deploying content to take advantage of that information. So once you kind of get your head around that, it does take a little bit of work to get your head around it, and it's changing all the time. So that's where, unless you're a total guru of the whole, ad tech stack, I think it's really helpful to have, partners who can help you, on that journey.
Yeah, and you've mentioned this a few times, and I know that you don't want to get in the weeds, but I'm going to ask you to be a little bit more detailed when you talk about what agencies are actually doing when it comes to cross-channel, because that also came up a lot on the board of challenges for brands.
Yeah. So, agencies, I think, are doing, tons. Well, most agencies are in charge of the media buying. So, if you're talking about, mobile acquisition or app installs, I spent a lot of time in the games business, and there it's all about app installs. Mm-hmm. So it runs the gamut. I think it really depends what the brand wants. So if you want, I want as many people as possible to engage with me so I can message them. Then I want them to download my app so I can have push notifications go out to them when they're in store. There are a bunch of these different things that that agencies can do based on those goals. But again, right. It could be, the brand I think should be kind of agnostic as to what tool the agency pulls out of their toolbox. If you're looking at things, let's say from a CRM perspective, well, everything looks like a CRM issue, right? But if you're looking at things from a customer engagement issue, then you're freer to make the right choices for for that problem. So I don't mean to be vague. It's just that
Yeah.
you could go on for hours listing out use cases. But
Right.
they're, again, look at the Lumascape, and if you're confused, call an agency.
There's only so much time in the day.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say agencies and brands are tag teaming it, right? They're working together well, all of this. And you're mentioning the consumer as sort of this objective. They're trying to reach the consumer. Is this an adversarial relationship with the consumer, or can this also be thought of in the same sort of collaborative light?
I think it's very collaborative. Like we saw an example earlier where really great content engaged a lot of consumers, and there are a lot of these cases over the last year or two with really great viral content that's been, emotionally engaging and gets, millions of views on YouTube or, social or whatever. So yeah, you want the customer involved, and the brand can't be hands off. The brand just can't be, oh, I trust you, go make it happen. There has to be someone at home, focusing on, how's our social activation going, or how's this or that going. But I think if that collaboration is working well, the feedback that's coming back from the consumers via Twitter or via other social channels or via mobile can then be reintegrated. Like the example we saw earlier, content came back, and the brand reactivated that content and pushed it out and made that part of an ongoing campaign. So I think that's, if you're doing a good job, consumers are engaged, and consumers are having fun. If they're having fun, that's good for your brand. And another thing that we focus on is, not always to be focused on selling. One of the verticals I'm working on is travel. And we talk about, not always be selling. If someone abandons a cart, it turns out that's a great time to offer them content about, hey, did you know New York's a great place to go in the winter? Here's some things to do in New York. Even though you decided not to purchase that trip, the content is still relevant, and you're working on a longer-term strategy about building a relationship with that user. So that does become a virtuous circle, I believe.
Right. So this is a complex relationship, both between the consumer and the brand and the agency and all of this. And back to that challenge board, something that was mentioned often is this brands want to know what to look for in the right partner, because there are so many. So I guess, as being objective as you can you give like a few things that brands should be thinking about when they're considering all these different technology partners?
Well, to me, I think there are two things that really matter most: trust and authenticity. And so to the extent that you are able to build a relationship that's built on those two pillars, then you're good. And if you come to a partner and they're just like, hey, we're just going to churn and burn and get you tons of installs or get you tons of clicks, or, we'll help you buy 3 million Twitter followers, that sort of stuff isn't really helpful.
Right.
But on the more involved way of doing things, I think your values as a brand need to be reflected, and not just in the agency, but the team that you're going to be working with. There needs, it's not just set it and forget it. You're going to have an ongoing relationship. It's going to be give and take. There are going to be good times. There are going to be bad times. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be meetings. There's going to be questions. So, I always want to work with people that I want to be in the room with.
Right.
And I think that's common sense, but I think that's a pretty good rule to use in looking for partners.
Okay, I think we have time for some questions if there are any from the audience. No?
Questions from the audience? None? There we go. That gentleman over there.
Hi, Mark. We talk about collaborations and agencies with brands and how to work toward that. I love some of the quotes that you have as far as working with people you want to be in the same room with. What happens when you aren't in the room with people you want to be with?
Fire them. Or don't work with them. I mean, it's a lot easier to fire an agency than it is someone on your team. But at the same time, seriously, I think, people, if the relationship is right, there's accountability on both sides. And before it gets to that point of it being, hey, this really isn't working, there should have been a couple of conversations about that. And if that's not happening, that might be, if the brand is not surfacing that, hey, we have a concern, or we don't think that's working, or can you explain this to us? We're not getting the transactions we want. The agency may be, well, you know what, this is, this is a multi-phase project, and we're not going to see transactions until we get to phase 3. We're in phase 1. Okay, that's a conversation. And then if you agree with that and if that makes sense and you're on the same page, great. If you feel like you're getting the runaround, then, and you know, again, a simple thing, but I always believe in trusting your gut. Like if there's something not right, and if you don't feel that you know, that team or that person is on the same page, then, you know, there are a lot of other people and companies out there that would love to have your business.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, yes, by all means.
As a company who calls on both agencies and brands, sometimes we receive different stories from the agencies and the brands.
Really?
How do you go about making sure that they're talking so that the same story is getting back to that third party?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and you know, probably beyond the scope of our ability to answer that in a short period. But again, I think it's a dialogue, and you know, it's kind of like sales 101. Like, who really is, you know, who's making stuff move? Who's the hidden decision makers? I mean, we've seen this happen a lot, where, you know, someone at the agency is looks like they're running the whole operation, but there's someone who we're not seeing, who's somewhere else, that's very interested but not day to day, and the person on the brand side wants kind of more of a strategic view. So I think if you've built, you know, trust, as I spoke about earlier, you should be able to broaden that conversation and be like, hey, you know, we'd like to have a conversation with you and the client. And if the agency is too busy, you know, don't worry about having the conversation with the client. Be like, hey, you know, we know it's near the holidays. We could loop around, you know, the beginning of next year about this, but here's some things we're thinking. What do you think? And at some point, everyone needs to work together. If one party doesn't want to work together, you know, that's definitely a red flag. I don't think there's an easy answer, but I'm a believer in over-communicating and just being honest and direct. And, you know, for us, we find that people find, wow, you know, Oracle being like open and direct and wanting to, you know, say, hey, we're flexible and you can work with other people. That's not the thinking that a lot of, or that's not the image a lot of people have had when they think of, you know, kind of older style software licensing sort of businesses. And that's, you know, I think that's interesting because companies change, people's perspectives change, the way people work changes. So, you know, I think engaging in an ongoing conversation is important. If you hit a brick wall, then, you know, especially if it's an agency, have that conversation with the customer, because the customer is ultimately paying and the agency should be doing what's in the customer's best interest.
All right. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you.
One of the most